Hey everybody, Smart Silver Stacker here. Today is Tuesday, December 27th, 2022. Markets resumed trading today following the observance of the Christmas holiday yesterday. Silver putting on a small but decent gains, back up over 24 bucks. Looks like silver now is going to finish 2022 in the green unless we get some major disruption between now and the end of the year. Just a few trading sessions left. And as we wrap up 2022, as we enter into the new year, this is a popular time for people to give their forecasts and their predictions for what we will experience in the year ahead. And that is exactly what former Russian president and current deputy chairman of the Russian Security Council, Dmitry Medvedev, took to Twitter to do. And Medvedev's predictions for 2023, there's 10 of them, and they've caused a bit of a stir, enough so that he got on Elon Musk's radar, and Elon Musk responded to this guy's forecast, and that has caused a bit of controversy as well. Medvedev's forecasts, I would say that they range from the slightly or somewhat improbable all the way up to the fantastic. Just to give you an example, one of the forecasts is that in 2023, Elon Musk will be elected president of a fractured United States. So it kind of gives you an idea of what we're talking about here. Now, this post, I think, was somewhat tongue-in-cheek in its presentation, and you'll kind of get that from what Medvedev said. But in today's video, I want to go through his forecast for 2023 because I thought, if a bit wacky, if a bit more like a wish list, they certainly were interesting to read through. And I'm going to give you my take on his forecast. And then also what I'd like you to do is, as we go through these in the comments down below, let me know what you think is the most improbable forecast from Medvedev, which is the least likely to come to pass, and then which one you think is potentially the most likely to actually play out. So leave me a comment down below to let me know what you think, and let's take a look at what Medvedev is forecasting for 2023. Okay, so before we just dive into what Medvedev had to say here, I do just want to put this all into perspective. This is a guy who's in a leadership position in a country heavily at odds with the U.S. in the West, and his forecasts certainly reflect that. So, take all of this with a huge grain of salt and look at it from that perspective. But nonetheless, I did think that his list of forecasts was interesting. So let's go ahead and see what he had to say. He started off the list with this introduction. On the New Year's Eve, everybody is into making predictions. Many come up with futuristic hypotheses as if competing to single out the wildest and even the most absurd ones. Here's our humble contribution. What can happen in 2023? So, this is kind of tongue-in-cheek. He's kind of acknowledging that some of these are extreme forecasts, but let's just get right into what he was forecasting for the coming year. Number one, oil price will rise to $150 a barrel, and gas price will top $5,000 per 1,000 cubic meters. Okay, this one personally seems maybe not guaranteed, but certainly within the realm of possibilities. We could see a significant spike up in the price of energy. There's a lot of factors at play right now that could put upward pressure on the price of energy. Russia is cutting their production in response to the G7 price cap by maybe 700,000 barrels a day. At the moment, that's the latest we've heard. There's also the possibility in 2023 that we could see further OPEC production cuts. If Saudi Arabia joins the BRICS nations, then, a lot of things could happen in the price of energy. And also, we've got China now opening up in 2023. That's going to be a significant increase in demand in terms of global energy consumption. And so it's absolutely possible, especially here in the West, that we could be paying higher prices for energy in the coming year. Now, I don't think that China or India is going to be paying $150 a barrel because they have secured cheap energy from Russia, but it's also looking like in 2023 the world may split into different energy markets, which is already happening now as we close out 2022. So this forecast I don't really think is too outlandish. Okay, and number two, the UK will rejoin the EU. Now, I don't follow UK politics too closely. This was not something that was really on my radar, but it does appear that there have recently been some polls. So this one reported in The Independent, a poll showing that rejoining the EU was the more popular position among those polled, coming in at 57% versus 43% who want to keep Brexit in place. So again, not saying this is guaranteed, but this is not too outlandish. Number three, the EU will collapse after the UK's return. The euro will drop out of use as the former EU currency. Okay, now you can see the forecast from Medvedev getting a little bit more extreme. Now, I don't think that an EU collapse in 2023 is in the cards, although the EU is certainly on shakier ground now than it was a year ago, in the sense that their energy security has been reduced significantly as a result of the embargo and sanctions on Russian fuel, which the EU up until now has relied fairly heavily upon. And the EU is likely to endure considerable economic hardship over the coming year, although I don't know that it's going to mean the end of the euro as a currency. The euro is almost certainly going to devalue somewhat in 2023. How much? Time will tell, but I suspect that inflation is going to persist and remain quite high in the EU. Now, moving on to number 4 here, Poland and Hungary will occupy western regions of the formerly existing Ukraine. Now, again, this one might sound kind of extreme, but it all depends on the outcome of the ongoing conflict. If the Ukrainian military reaches a breaking point and begins to capitulate to Russian forces in any way, then we may very well see Polish and possibly Hungarian forces move into western Ukraine. And this is a story from Defense News about how the U.S. State Department has cleared the sale of Abrams tanks to Poland. So the U.S. is going to be selling 116 Abrams tanks to Poland, and if they were looking to occupy Ukraine, that certainly would be some equipment that would come in handy. So whether or not Poland is going to move into western Ukraine, again, it all depends on what happens with the conflict there. But if Ukrainian forces simply begin to crumble, I could see this happening. That seems within the realm of possibilities. Now, moving on to number 5, and we get back into the realm of the somewhat extreme here, Medvedev saying the Fourth Reich will be created, encompassing the territory of Germany and its satellites. And he goes on to list some countries here who he thinks will be part of this new political entity he sees forming. This seems extremely unlikely to me, especially given the 1-year time frame here for these forecasts, and I'm going to give this one a hard pass. I really don't see that happening. And more of the same here with number 6. War will break out between France and the Fourth Reich. Europe will be divided, Poland repartitioned in the process. And again, this is where the list starts looking a little bit less like forecasts and a little bit more like a wish list for Medvedev. Certainly, this would behoove him if his European opponents began to fight among themselves, but this seems highly unlikely. And also, there is the element of a common enemy posed by Russia, or a perceived enemy at least, for these EU member states, and I think that will create a bit more unity among them as they will feel the need to draw together to oppose the forces that they, again, they're perceived enemies there in Russia. Now, number 7, Northern Ireland will separate from the UK and join the Republic of Ireland. This seems like possibly more wishful thinking on the part of Medvedev. Anything to take away from the power of the UK seems to be like something that he would desire, and I have not heard anything or read anything that would indicate that this would be a political reality anytime in the near future. Now, number 8, we get into the highly fantastic ones here, and perhaps the most interesting and also strangest forecast from Medvedev, and that is that civil war will break out in the U.S. California and Texas will become independent states as a result. Texas and Mexico will form an allied state, and Elon Musk will win the presidential election in a number of states which, after the new civil wars end, will have been given to the GOP. And that is a lot to happen in 1 year, don't you think? The idea of the Texas-Mexico alliance, particularly entertaining here, I think. The whole thing is just very bizarre. Sounds like the plot for a sci-fi movie. And the thing I will say most about this forecast here, number 8, is that while I do view this as being completely outside of the realm of possibility for 2023. I mean, I suppose anything could happen, right? But this is highly unlikely. But the thing about this forecast is that if you were to come to me 5 years ago and tell me that this was your forecast for any coming period of time, I would have thought it was completely absurd, no way even whatsoever within the realm of possibility. And now, in 2022, heading into 2023, this is the sort of thing you read it and you think, that probably won't happen. But, the degree of incredulity is diminished somewhat between 5 years ago and today, and that tells you a lot about how things have been changing. But nonetheless, I don't think we're going to see President Musk in 2023. Now, number 9, all the largest stock markets and financial activity will leave the US and Europe and move to Asia. And that seems pretty unlikely, although I will say that in 2023, there is the strong possibility that Asian markets like the Shanghai Metals Exchange, for example, or the Shanghai Futures Exchange will take on an increasing role in the global economy. And this is going to be because countries have witnessed the financial weaponization of the West, excluding Russia from the SWIFT system, freezing Russian assets as a result of these sanctions after this conflict began. And that means that nations will want to diversify how they transact commerce because they don't want to be entirely dependent on the dollar and Western financial system, which they've seen could be weaponized against you if you become politically at odds with the West. So I don't think that all of the markets and financial activity are going to leave the U.S., but I do think that Asia will continue to see a larger market share of that type of business. And then finally here, number 10, Medvedev says the Bretton Woods system of monetary management will collapse, leading to the IMF and World Bank crash. Euro and dollar will stop circulating as the global reserve currencies. Digital fiat currencies will be actively used instead. Now, it is possible, I suppose, that the post-Bretton Woods system, the purely fiat system that we have today, where the dollar is held in the world reserve position and as the world reserve currency, it is on the decline, but I don't think it's going to wrap up in the coming year. Although we have seen the trend that nations around the world are reducing their exposure to the dollar, and they're holding less and less in reserve, and they're holding less and less U.S. dollar-denominated debt like U.S. treasuries in reserve. And so I do think that we will see a trend towards de-dollarization continue, but I don't think that this is going to be the year that everything crashes, although the digital fiat currencies could absolutely come into play. This is a headline that we got from Investopedia back in November about the New York Fed launching a digital dollar pilot program with big banks. So a CBDC, a central bank digital currency, and a digital dollar are on the way, although that doesn't necessarily mean that the IMF and the World Bank are going to crash in the interim. It's entirely possible that we may just see a digital dollar introduced, cash eliminated, and all transactions tracked and controlled before we see the IMF and the World Bank crash. Although I do think that the dollar as the world reserve currency is on the way out. So it's, a hard thing to time. A currency like the US dollar has been the world reserve for the past 80 years or so. It's not going to die a swift death, until it does. It could be one of these things where the dollar declines very slowly for a prolonged period of time, and then suddenly some event, some black swan, or some world and paradigm shifting event takes place that causes the dollar to lose its status. But will that come in 2023? Anybody's guess, I think. But this one I would also put at a low probability of taking place exactly the way he lays it out. So let me know what you think in the comments down below about these forecasts from Dmitry Medvedev. Do you think any of them have a possibility of coming true? Leave me a comment down below to let me know what you think is the most likely out of this lot to occur and which one is the most fantastic and least likely. And if you have some forecasts for 2023, leave those down in the comments as well. Again, take everything in this video with a grain of salt. This is meant to be more of a fun one. But do leave me a comment down below to let me know what you think. Thanks for watching, everybody. Stay safe and happy stacking, and I will catch you next time. Smart Silver Stacker, out.